Hey, welcome to the Social Thread podcast. At Social Thread, you can be a part of a community where you will belong, you will thrive, and you can explore your faith on your own terms. I'm Robert Payne, and with me always
is Rob
is
Reinders.
welcome back, my friend. And today's episode, we're going to continue to talk about the importance of setting healthy boundaries. Rob, what do we mean by this?
So as we're in this third pillar of Social Thread of what it means to love yourself, a key part of that is after you know yourself, after you practice self-compassion, is knowing sort of what your limits are, is taking care of yourself. And today we want to talk about a couple ways to do that. And the first is really through self-care, and the second one is around like, hey, is this a healthy journey that I'm on for myself? Or am I being abused or manipulated? Or maybe I've been down this path before and felt like I got burned, and I want to make sure I don't do that again. And one of my favorite parts about that comes from John Wesley, who was an 18th century religious leader. He was an Anglican priest and the founder of the Methodist movement. He said it was imperative to do no harm while exploring and practicing your faith. And that's always been a real key thing for me, and not just to keep in mind for myself, but as a religious or spiritual leader, to make sure that I'm doing no harm to somebody else's practice and exploration while they're on a journey. And that's something I really try to keep in mind. So this other piece is the self-care piece. And we know that Jesus spent a lot of time in prayer and in solitude, and he definitely chose who he wanted to spend time with. We read a lot about that in the Gospels. You know, he picked his disciples, and he picked those he was hanging around. And usually those folks were the outcasts and the people that other people didn't want to hang out with. But he created these habits and he created these relationships that brought wholeness and healing and love to other people, especially those folks who are broken, and overall to a broken world. So it's important to keep in mind that, as we've said before, we all bring perspectives to this journey of faith, for better or for worse. And while we want to encourage people to be open to themselves and to understand and to engage with perspectives different from their own, we know that that can come with certain risks, right? We preach a lot about and talk a lot about, hey, you got to feel empathy for other people. We want to accept and celebrate other people, but we also know that there's bounds, there's limits to that. If opening ourselves to certain perspectives becomes harmful for us or harmful for others, we want to be attentive and aware of that. So we know that being vulnerable can be risky, because it means we have to trust those we're being vulnerable with, and those people could judge us, or could reject us, or could use that vulnerability against us. And I know what that feeling is like, and it's not a good one. So we have to determine on this faith journey, what are our non-negotiables? Where are those places where we say we're not going to do harm to ourselves or to others? And because sometimes on the journey we have to make a course correction, or maybe sometimes we have to walk away. So some important questions to ask ourselves while we're on this journey is, how far do we want to explore? How far do we want to challenge ourselves? What's off limits? What's helpful on this journey, but what also might be harmful? And also what's important to ask is, who are we surrounding ourselves with? And what habits and practices have we adopted on this journey that contribute to our health and to our well-being? So I think the overall takeaway here is knowing that it's a give and take. We don't want to avoid something because maybe we had a bad experience with it in the past. We also want to push ourselves and challenge ourselves, but also we need to know, like, ooh, what's too far? So this is a pretty deep topic. I actually feel like I could talk about it for a really long time. But let's talk with that self-care aspect of setting healthy boundaries. Robert, what are your self-care habits that are really helpful to you?
Sure. So, so a lot of times for me, I'm constantly evaluating boundaries, and I'm constantly saying, okay, where do I need to make more boundaries? It's probably my question is, what boundaries do I need to set? As opposed to, well, I can probably push this boundary a little further, but yeah, I'm probably being more and more restrictive as I kind of have that conversation with myself, particularly, it's who I'm surrounding myself with, what kind of influences am I taking? So, for people, I will tend to make pretty strong boundaries for people who I feel like might be like might sucking vitality, who maybe I'm noticing that person when I'm talking to them, they're not listening to me, or they're not wanting to have like a two-way conversation. Maybe that person might be someone who enables a bad habit in me, or someone who or encourages a bad habit in me, something like that. And it can be anything. It could be, hey, I'm around somebody who like say I struggle in the past with eating way too much of like food, and and so you don't may not realize this, Rob, but I actually lost 103 pounds
Wow.
several years
That's
ago.
incredible.
Yeah, well, but I realized that even though some people that I hung around with were totally great people, they too enabled me. Not that they pushed me, but it was a culture of just eating too much, and so I made boundaries then, so I can't hang around with those guys all the time. So anyway, that's a kind of a good example, kind of a surface level example, but that really helped me. And the people that I did surround myself with were super athlete type people, and these are the if I wanted to set this goal, these are the people that I need to hang around. And then I think another, yeah, yeah. So that's probably a good example of how I create boundaries, and they're often restrictive boundaries.
Yeah, and that there's back to that give and take again, right? Like how do we don't want to shut ourselves off and become a recluse, or become exclusive necessarily, or shut ourselves off from any and all perspectives that are different from our own. And I think that gets into that next pillar, or not next pillar, next part of this guidepost of um, when we talk about loving yourself, what do you believe? Why do you believe it? Are you caring for yourself? Does this belief system, does this community bring me and my neighbor love in life?
Mm-hmm.
Those are, I think, the things to keep in mind more broadly of, hey, am I in an abusive relationship here with this faith journey, or with this community? I've come here to connect with others. I've come here to explore my faith, to continue this journey, and something doesn't feel quite right. But I need these things. I need community. I need a place to become more compassionate, more generous, to connect with God, to connect with other people. And I know that's something that religion and institutional religion has struggled with for thousands of years. I don't
Yeah.
know that we're going to solve it. But we all crave that. We all crave this journey, and we all crave being part of that
Mm-hmm.
community. And we can, the crazy thing is, we can do everything in our power to set our own boundaries, but at the
Mm-hmm.
end of the day, we could still get burned. But I think ultimately that risk is often worth the reward. It's a tough one. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's a tough one. Yeah.
Yep. Well, hey, like you said, we could be talking about this probably for another few hours here. But I think um, uh, I think that if we have people listening to this podcast and they're saying, I need to be out of a community maybe that might be oppressive, or I am not able to thrive and I don't feel like I belong in this community, a lot of times you think to yourself, well, I have nowhere to go. That if I leave this community, I'm losing all of my friends. People are going to shun me. I have nowhere to go. And so honestly, that's really why we created Social Thread. Social Thread is a place where you can work out your faith or your personal philosophy, on your own terms, with a community that will help you do that. And so if you want to get involved with Social Thread, you can come to www.socialthread.org, click Get Involved, and we'll reach out. Maybe you also have a community that you're a part of, but you want to support what we're doing here. We're a nonprofit, so you can go to Social Thread /support and make a tax deductible donation to support us in that way. But anyway, hey man, this is a great podcast. And so thanks. We will see you next time, my friend.
All right. I agree. It's a great podcast with great hosts, and always a
Indeed.
pleasure. Take care, everybody.
All right. See
All
ya.
right.